Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
It was exactly 12:14 p.m. when Claire, sitting on the edge of the bed, took one last look at the hotel room door. Her fingers gripped the white bedspread as if that gesture could contain the storm brewing inside her. The space around her was clean, well decorated, with a luxurious feel, but at the same time, it held a coldness that reminded her everything there was temporary, fleeting, just like the moment she was living. Silence filled every corner of that room, as if trying to smother any thought of turning back. It was the kind of silence that seemed to speak, to demand, to question. And she heard everything in silence, chest tight and eyes fixed on the door. Claire's breathing was uneven. Her throat felt dry, her heart raced, and her stomach churned. She was there by her own choice, but each passing second made her question if taking that step was worth it. Her phone, placed on the nightstand, buzzed occasionally with trivial notifications, messages from the mom's school group, a supermarket reminder, a new email alert, everything that formed her routine as a married, dedicated, predictable woman. But at that moment, in that space outside her usual reality, it all seemed to belong to another life. A life she would ignore for just 1 hour. She had never done anything like this before. Her messages with Ethan started out innocently. A like on an old photo, a complimentary comment, a few jokes traded on a sleepless night. Little by little, the compliments grew bolder, the conversations more intimate. Before she knew it, she had created a hidden folder on her phone with his photos, saving snippets of chats that made her smile when nobody was watching. Ethan had a voice that moved her. It was firm, gentle, and carried a charm that made her feel special, even through the screen. He knew what to say and when to say it. And as dangerous as it was, it awakened a feeling in her that had been dormant for a long time. Claire closed her eyes for a moment and tried to control her breathing. She wanted to keep her composure. If she told herself it was just a lunch outing, maybe she could downplay the abyss she was about to cross. She ran her hand through her hair, adjusted the strap of her dress, and checked her appearance in the mirror across from the bed. She looked beautiful. She had taken care to look nice, wearing the perfume she usually saved for anniversaries and special occasions. It was ironic. She was using that perfume to meet another man. A man she only knew through pictures and words, but who somehow seemed to see her in a way Daniel, her husband, no longer did. Then the doorknob turned. Claire froze. For a split second, she thought about running to the door to keep it from opening. She thought about pretending it was a mistake, that this wasn't the right place. She thought about hiding in the bathroom, vanishing, going home as if everything had been just a bottled-up impulse. But she had no time. The door opened slowly, and there was Ethan. He was there in the flesh, much more real than in the photos. He wore a white shirt that contrasted with his tan skin, his dark hair impeccably combed, and that smile, the gentle, almost shy smile she had pictured so many times during silent nights, was right in front of her. Claire swallowed hard, her heart pounding like war drums in her chest. Ethan said her name. And in that instant, hearing the voice that had so often lulled her over the phone, she knew she'd crossed an invisible but definitive line. They approached each other slowly, without hurry. The only light in the room came from the window, giving it an almost cinematic atmosphere. Ethan sat next to her on the bed. Neither of them said much. They didn't need to. The look they exchanged said it all. What happened there wasn't a thoughtless mistake, a sudden impulse. It was the result of something that had been growing slowly, fed by hidden desires, suppressed needs, and longings stifled by the weight of routine. Claire gently touched his face, as if wanting to confirm he was real. Ethan held her hand, ran his fingers delicately over the wedding ring she still wore, but he said nothing. There was respect in his gesture, but also an intensity that said, "You chose to be here." And she had chosen it, despite everything inside her that screamed otherwise. When their lips met, the world around them seemed to vanish. For a few minutes, there was no marriage, no kids, no guilt or consequences. There were just two bodies, two stories intersecting out of necessity, out of longing, out of a desire to feel something that had been missing from everyday life. Every touch, every gesture was both a relief and a condemnation. Claire surrendered with her eyes closed, seeking in Ethan's body what she hadn't felt for years in Daniel's arms, not just passion, but the feeling of truly being wanted. Time passed quickly. It felt like they had just arrived when the clock already read 1:37 p.m. Ethan got up, put his shirt back on with the same calm he had when taking it off, and approached Claire with a serene look. There were no promises, no rehearsed lines. Just a long, tender kiss on her forehead that she hadn't expected. He left without looking back, leaving the same silence he found when he entered. Claire stayed there, sitting, hugging her knees, listening to the muffled sound of the door closing. Her breathing was still uneven, her heart still racing, and her mind was adrift in a sea of questions she couldn't answer. She knew it wasn't just about desire. It wasn't just one body seeking another. It was something deeper, more painful. It was about the need to feel alive, even if only for an hour. Claire turned the key in the front door of her house with slow, almost automatic movements. It was a little past 7 in the evening, and the muffled sound of children's laughter slipped through the gaps of the door, as if life inside hadn't paused, as if everything was exactly as she'd left it. When she opened the door, the warmth of home washed over her with a mix of comfort and distress. The smell of freshly cooked food hit her senses strongly, and she almost let herself be fooled by that sense of normalcy. It was a familiar smell, full of good memories. Lasagna. Her favorite. As soon as she stepped in, her husband greeted her with open arms and a smile that looked like it had been waiting all day for that moment. Daniel was a sweet man, someone whose eyes showed genuine trust. He pulled her into a tight hug, and she felt the weight of her own body nearly collapse onto his shoulders. The kiss he placed on her forehead had the same affection Ethan's had earlier that day, but it came from a completely different place. It was a kiss from someone who loved without question, who truly believed that in his arms was the woman of his life. "I made your favorite lasagna," he said with childlike excitement, while the kids came running down the hallway, their faces lit up with joy at the sight of their mother. They held up sheets of paper covered in colorful drawings. Scribbles of dinosaurs and superheroes, made just for her. Claire smiled. She smiled by reflex, by necessity, by survival. Because in that scene of domestic happiness, her inner world was in pieces. The living room was the stage of genuine joy, and she was the leading actress in a role she knew well, the devoted wife, the loving mother, the woman who has everything under control. They sat down to eat together. Daniel pulled out her chair the way he had since they were dating. The kids told frantic stories about their day at school, each vying for her attention. She listened to every word, asked questions, reacted with enthusiasm, but inside she fought an invisible force that pulled her soul to the ground. Each bite of lasagna felt like it weighed a ton in her mouth. It tasted the same, but there was a bitterness in every chew. She kept wondering how she could be there, surrounded by love, while carrying such a heavy secret. As she watched Daniel laugh at the children's antics, she studied the details of his face. The brown eyes that had comforted her so many times, the gentle lines time had drawn on him, the way he adjusted his collar without noticing. Everything about him was genuine, constant, present. And that hurt more than any punishment could. Because the more whole he appeared, the more broken she felt. This was the life she had built, and right there at that table, surrounded by love, was everything she once dreamed of having. And yet, something inside her had looked elsewhere. Dinner continued with laughter, praise for the food, and small talk about the next day's tasks. Claire responded to everything kindly, acting out the familiarity of a routine she had mastered for years. She knew exactly when to laugh, when to get up for her son's favorite juice, when to feign surprise at the youngest story for the 10th time. It was a silent mastery of someone who had learned to play the part of the perfect woman. But deep down, a whisper repeated cruelly, "You betrayed all of this." After dessert, she helped clear the dishes while the kids flopped onto the sofa, laughing at a cartoon. Daniel came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You're my world, you know," he said softly, as if he expected no answer. Claire stopped drying the plate in her hands. Her eyes instantly filled with tears. But she held back the urge to cry. She had to keep it together. She turned her face and smiled, whispering, "I know," which sounded more like an apology than a declaration of love. That night, the children fell asleep quickly, worn out from all the play. Daniel stayed with them for a few minutes, lying between them, listening to their calm breathing, running his fingers through their older son's hair. Claire watched from the doorway, arms crossed, leaning against the frame, her heart aching. She wondered if she deserved that scene. If she'd ever have the courage to tell the truth. If there was any forgiveness possible. She went back to the bedroom before he did, put on a simple nightgown, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. When Daniel lay down next to her, he pulled the sheet gently, unaware of the chasm between them. He turned toward her, kissed her shoulder, and said goodnight with the same tenderness as always. Claire responded with a muffled sound and stayed still, looking into the darkness. The room was silent, the kind of silence that exists only when everything seems peaceful on the outside. But inside her, there was a storm. Thoughts rushed through her mind at breakneck speed. Scenes of what she'd experienced with Ethan that afternoon, words exchanged, sensations lived. And at the same time, her children's laughter, Daniel's affection, the fresh-out-of-the-oven lasagna. All mixed up, all confusing. She felt torn between two worlds that refused to coexist. While Daniel slept soundly beside her, she kept her eyes open, feeling the weight of what she'd done growing like a stone in her chest. The sound of the digital clock next to the bed ticked away the minutes, indifferent to the pain filling the room. Claire pulled the blanket up to her chin, turned onto her side, and closed her eyes tight. She wanted to sleep, but her body wouldn't obey. Her head throbbed. Guilt weighed heavily. And deep down, she already knew, what began as a temporary detour had turned into something much deeper. More dangerous. Harder to leave behind. The weeks that followed flowed like a silent river under the bridge Claire pretended to balance on. Life went on around her as if on autopilot, but something inside her stirred. She kept going to work, picking the kids up from school, making dinner, taking care of the house. Each gesture, each movement was precise, smooth, functional. But behind her calm eyes, there were storms. The meeting with Ethan, which she had promised herself would be the only one, turned into the first of many. They always happened the same way, during lunch break. Claire made excuses with unsettling ease. She told her coworker she had to go to the bank about a credit card, claimed she had a doctor's appointment to explain why she was late, or simply disappeared without explanation, knowing no one would suspect her. After all, who would doubt someone so proper, so committed, so invisibly flawed? Every time she crossed the hotel door, her heart pounded and her blood burned in her veins. She felt like a different person. Lighter, more alive, bolder. Ethan always welcomed her with that calm smile, his shirt neatly pressed, arms wide like a haven. He knew just what to say. He knew how to touch her with the right tenderness, the right intensity. And for an hour, the world outside ceased to exist. There were no clocks, no guilt, no obligations. There was only her, whole, desired, free. But as soon as she stepped back onto the sidewalk outside the hotel, reality slapped her in the face. Each step toward her car made her feel that freedom slipping through her fingers. She started the engine in silence, adjusted the rearview mirror, tied her hair back again, and before driving off, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes looked different. Darker. More lost. One afternoon, when she arrived home, she found Daniel in the kitchen, laughing quietly as he and the kids built a house of cards. Claire paused in the doorway for a few seconds, her purse still over her shoulder, trying to figure out when she'd become a stranger to that scene. The kids ran over to her, hugged her, showed off new drawings, begged for cookies. Daniel stood up, offered her water, asked how her day was. She answered mechanically, using ready-made phrases and practiced smiles. But inside, something started to hurt in a different way. At night, insomnia became her constant companion. She tossed and turned in bed and turned to watch Daniel sleeping next to her, so calm, so at peace. His chest rose and fell at a steady pace. And that hurt her. Because inside her, nothing was steady, everything was noise. Some days, she thought about confessing everything. About crying, kneeling, begging for forgiveness. Other days, she convinced herself she deserved this small escape, that she was just reclaiming a part of herself that everyday life had erased. But the truth was that nothing justified the weight she carried. And that weight kept growing. She started paying closer attention to her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes looked more sunken. Her smile was less spontaneous. Her touch was less present. Her kids asked her to play, and she put it off. Daniel hugged her, and she responded with only a brief squeeze. She was physically there, but her heart felt split between two worlds that ignored each other. There was one Saturday in particular that stood out. They were at the park, the four of them, having a picnic. The sun was high, the kids chased soap bubbles, Daniel took pictures with his phone. Claire stepped away to answer a call from Ethan. His voice was smooth on the other end, asking if she was thinking of him, if she wanted him, if they were okay. She answered yes to everything, even as she watched her family playing just a few yards away. When she hung up, she felt dirty. She went into a public restroom, splashed water on her face, and stared into her own eyes in the mirror. She tried to find a reasonable explanation. But all she saw was a woman drained from pretending. That night, after putting the kids to bed, Claire sat on the bedroom floor beside the bed, phone in hand. She opened her messaging app and wrote, "I think it's past time. We have to stop." She stared at that sentence for minutes. Then she erased it. Then wrote it again. Then saved it as a draft. Her finger hovered over the send button like someone holding a knife to the last piece of themselves. When she finally lay down, Daniel was still in the shower. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, felt like crying herself to sleep. But no tears came. Only one thought repeated over and over like a mantra in her head, "The next time will be the last." This time, she felt more certain than before. Something inside her couldn't keep balancing two worlds. Exhaustion was eating her up in silence. Claire turned onto her side and pretended to be asleep when Daniel came out of the bathroom. He lay down next to her and whispered something about their day at the park, about what a nice day it had been. She mumbled a response and didn't move. But deep down, a decision was taking shape. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be simple. But it had to end. Because guilt, more than desire, was finally screaming. And this time, she couldn't silence it. The alarm went off that morning as it always did, but Claire had been awake long before it rang. She'd spent the whole night with her eyes open, body still under the sheets, heart beating so fast she couldn't find any real rest. Outside, the sky was still a grayish blue, and she spent several minutes watching the slow dance of light coming through the edges of the curtain. In her mind, one thought repeated like a stubborn whisper, "Today is the last time." She went through her routine on autopilot. She made breakfast for the kids, packed their lunches with sliced fruit, little notes, and their favorite cookies. She listened to their laughter, answered their questions, admired their scribbles on the back of notebooks. Daniel, as usual, was there, making sure the younger one's backpack was ready, tying the older one's sneakers with the easygoing manner of a present father who can handle anything. At another time, she would have been more touched, maybe changed her mind. But now, her numbed conscience kept her from feeling any real emotion. It was like watching her own life as if it were a movie whose ending she already knew. Daniel's eyes met hers for a moment, and she hid her discomfort behind a smile, which he returned. Later, at lunchtime, already in her car, Claire gripped the steering wheel tightly. Traffic seemed to move in slow motion. The voices on the radio, occasional honks, cars lined up next to her, everything was a blur. She arrived 20 minutes early. She parked in the usual spot, turned off the engine, and sat there, hands in her lap, staring at the building ahead. The discreet hotel, its modest sign, the lobby with frosted glass doors. It was a familiar sight, almost intimate. She took several deep breaths before getting out. She walked with light steps, her coat partly covering her face, sunglasses hiding her tired eyes. When she entered the room, she recognized the familiar smell of the place, a mix of clean sheets, polished wood, and a soft lingering fragrance. The same room. The same bedside lamp. The same mirror with its worn frame. The same pillow propped against the headboard. But something was different inside her. For the first time, her hands were shaking uncontrollably. Her phone slipped from her palm as she tried to type. She started to write a message, "Today is the last time." Then she erased it. Rewrote it. Sent it. Deleted it before he could see. Stood up. Sat back down. The minutes piled on her shoulders like a weight. The silence in that room felt so thick it seemed to breathe with her. The sound of the doorknob turning shattered her thoughts. Claire jumped to her feet. She expected to see Ethan, expected his usual calm smile, the immaculate white shirt, the woodsy cologne, his arms ready to welcome her. But instead, she saw Daniel. He walked in decisively. His face was serious. His eyes were locked on her. Claire froze, her throat parched, no words coming from her lips. For a second, she thought she was dreaming, an illusion built by the guilt that had grown day by day. But it was real. Daniel was there, standing before her, taking in every detail of what he saw, his expression a mix of pain and cold detachment. She murmured his name as if saying it out loud would shatter the nightmare. But Daniel didn't answer. He just looked at her. No yelling, no scene, no questions. The absence of words hurt more than anything he could have said. Claire took a hesitant step forward and stopped halfway. Her body felt heavy, her legs weak. Daniel stood there like a silent judge, someone who had crossed an inner threshold few ever cross, the threshold of discovering something secretly devastating. He already knew. Not just from a few minutes ago. He'd known for days, maybe weeks. His eyes held the very thing she'd feared most, disappointment, hurt, disbelief. That was when he revealed what he'd been carrying. He had noticed her absences. The empty stares. The poorly made excuses. The growing distance, the shorter hugs, the longer silences. In silence, he started collecting clues. A changed phone password. A different perfume on one of her blouses. A lipstick shade she hadn't worn in months. But what really drove him was instinct, the kind that whispers something essential is being taken from you. He wasn't proud of what he did. He installed a tracker in her car, pushed by the torment of not knowing. For days, everything seemed normal, the same routes, same times, nothing unusual. Until, one day, the GPS indicated a change. She'd left her usual path and was heading somewhere different. His heart pounded. Without a second thought, he got into his car and followed. When he arrived, he parked on the opposite side of the street. There was her car, right in front of a motel. The pain he felt wasn't exactly a shock, it was confirmation of everything he feared. The worst part was yet to come. He waited, never blinking. Minutes later, he saw Claire leave as calmly as if she'd been to the grocery store. So casual. So used to that place. In that moment, something inside him shattered forever. Now, face to face with the truth, Daniel wasn't looking for explanations. He didn't believe any words could fix it. He took out his phone and, with steady hands, began to record. Claire, desperate, tried to move closer, tried to speak, but the words seemed useless. Tears rolled uncontrollably. "It was a mistake, forgive me," she said between sobs. But Daniel just kept filming, eyes locked on hers. He stopped recording with a single sentence, spoken quietly, without anger, but with the certainty of someone who had already made up his mind. "The court will decide who gets the kids. And it won't be you." He turned around and walked out. The door closed slowly, not with a slam but with a sound that would echo in her memory for a long time. A sound that marked the end of everything that had once been built with love and trust. That room, which for so many days had been her hiding place, was now the scene of her downfall. Claire remained there, unable to move, her hands over her tear-stained face. Her breathing was shaky. Time, once again, seemed to slow, but now, not out of desire. It was the aftermath. The despair. The inevitable collapse. Claire stayed frozen in the middle of the room, clad only in the guilt and silence that now took up every inch of that space. The soft click of the door closing behind Daniel still echoed like a muffled shot. The weight of his gaze, one that demanded no explanations, crushed everything she thought she had under control. She dropped to the floor, her knees buckling as though her body already knew resistance was futile. Her tears came effortlessly, laden with panic, regret, and the painful awareness that from here on out, everything would be different. Time seemed to ooze by until, a few minutes later, she heard the doorknob turn again. For one desperate second, she thought Daniel had come back, maybe to yell at her, to demand answers, to listen. A brief, foolish hope. But the person who entered was Ethan, as calm as always, as if no tragedy had just unfolded there. He stopped when he saw her on the floor, makeup smeared, dress tossed aside, face swollen. She looked up at him and murmured, in a broken voice, "Please, go away." Ethan hesitated. He was rooted to the threshold. He glanced around as if only now realizing the gravity of what was happening within those four walls. His presence, once thrilling and forbidden, was now a reminder of the chaos. He stepped closer but kept his distance. He spoke only what was necessary, with an unexpected detachment. "You should handle this with your family. I'm not the kind of man who destroys a home." Then he turned away. No promises. No emotion. Just the sound of his footsteps receding. Claire was alone. Her breathing swung between sobs and silence. Her eyes, now dry, were burning. In that room, which once offered escape, fantasy, refuge, there was nothing left but ruins. She no longer had anything. Her husband had left, his trust in pieces, her children were at risk of drifting away, and the man who once made her feel alive was gone without a backward glance. All that remained was her, facing her own reflection in the mirror, lacking the courage to recognize herself. The fall was complete. And silent. Like all falls we carve out with our own choices. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.